She built an empire on the principle that trust was a liability, and someone inside that empire decided to prove her right. Celeste Ashford had spent a decade turning paranoia into profit, building one of America's most feared cybersecurity firms from a rented server room and a maxed-out credit card. Tomorrow morning, she would sign a billion-dollar federal contract that would cement her legacy. Tonight, in the concrete quiet of her company's underground parking garage, a stranger with a military dog was crouching beneath her SUV, and her security team had their hands on him. She had 30 seconds before her world changed forever. She just didn't know it yet. If this story found you tonight, drop a like and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. The parking garage beneath Ashford Sentinel's headquarters smelled the way all underground spaces smelled: concrete dust, exhaust residue, the particular staleness of recycled air that never quite made it to the surface. At 11:40 on a Tuesday night, it held exactly 4 vehicles: Celeste's black SUV, 2 company sedans, and a white utility van with a magnetic decal on the side that read Cascade Emergency Systems, Backup Power Solutions. Logan Barrett was lying on a mechanic's creeper beneath the electrical panel housing in the northeast corner when he heard the elevator open. He didn't move right away. He was holding a multimeter against a corroded terminal, tracking a fault in the building's emergency generator relay, and the reading was giving him something unexpected. He'd been called out here at 9:30 by a facilities dispatch that had flagged the backup power system as non-compliant ahead of tomorrow's federal inspection. It was the kind of job that paid well enough and asked nothing more of him than competence and a willingness to work odd hours. Both of those Logan had in supply. Ghost was lying 6 feet away near the van's rear tire, head resting on his front paws, ears rotating slowly like radar dishes. The Belgian Malinois was 9 years old, retired from active duty 3 years ago, and still operated on the same interior logic he'd been trained with: observe, catalog, report. He did this even when there was nothing to report, which was most of the time now. Logan had learned to read the difference between Ghost's idle scanning and his alert posture. They were completely different things. Right now, Ghost was idle. Logan finished his reading, noted the fault code, and was reaching back into his tool case when he heard footsteps, more than one set, coming from the direction of the elevator bank. He rolled out from under the panel housing and sat up. There were 3 of them, 2 in dark security uniforms, the third a woman in a charcoal blazer with her phone already raised. Logan recognized the woman from the company's lobby photo, the kind of framed portrait that hung near the reception desk with a name placard underneath. He'd glanced at it on the way in. Celeste Ashford, Chief Executive Officer. In the photo, she'd looked composed in the way of someone who had practiced composure. In person, at almost midnight, she looked tired and edged in a way the photo hadn't suggested. Her hair was pulled back but not neatly. There were faint shadows under her eyes. She was attractive in the way that people who move very fast and sleep too little sometimes are. Something sharp and unfinished about it. She stopped walking when she saw him. The security guards didn't. "Sir, I need you to stand up slowly and keep your hands visible." The one on the left, heavier, with a close-cropped beard, had his hand on his radio, not his weapon, which was the professional choice. Logan noted that. "Already standing," Logan said. He was 6'1" and looked it in the garage's sodium lighting, and he kept his hands loose at his sides, fingers spread. "Logan Barrett, Cascade Emergency Systems. I've got a work order from your facilities department, and my ID badge is clipped to my vest. I can show you. Don't move yet." Not moving. Celeste had come to a stop about 15 feet back. She was looking at him with an expression he recognized. Not fear exactly, more the concentrated version of suspicion that people with real power developed when they felt their perimeter had been breached. She was running calculations. He could see it. "Why is there a dog?" she said. "He goes where I go. He's retired military, not a threat. His name is Ghost." Ghost, at the sound of his name, lifted his head, looked at Celeste once, and put his head back down. Logan thought that probably didn't help his case. "We didn't authorize an animal on the premises," the second guard said. "Your facilities coordinator, a man named Derek Sewer, did. You can call him. I have his number if you've lost it." The bearded guard had moved to Logan's left, positioning himself for angle, which was competent. Logan let him do it. He had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to de-escalate a situation was to give it nowhere to go. No resistance to push against, no signal that could be misread. He stood still and let them look at him and waited. Celeste was still watching him. "Why are you here at midnight?" "Because that's when your facilities team called me. The backup generator relay for this building is throwing a fault code, and you've got a federal inspection at 8 tomorrow morning. If that system isn't certified compliant, your inspection fails." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite belief, but the beginning of it. The moment when the inconvenience of a story being true outweighed the comfort of dismissing it. "Check the work order," she said to the bearded guard. "Already pulling it up." Logan waited. Ghost had rolled onto his side. Then Ghost wasn't on his side anymore. It happened without drama. The dog simply came upright, head low, nose working. Logan had seen this 10,000 times, and his own body responded before his mind had finished processing it. The same way it always had. A cold clarification, everything narrowing. "Ghost." The dog was already moving, not toward the humans, toward the SUV, toward Celeste's vehicle, specifically, circling around the driver's side with his nose dropping toward the undercarriage. He stopped beneath the rear axle and sat, the trained alert, motionless, positioned, ears forward. "Everyone needs to move back," Logan said. His voice had changed, and he knew it had changed. The conversational register was gone, and what replaced it was something flatter and more direct. "Right now. Away from that vehicle." "What?" Celeste started. "Away from the vehicle. I need all three of you against the far wall, elevator side. Move." "This is ridiculous," the second guard said. "You don't give orders here." "Your dog just alerted," Logan said, and he was already moving toward Ghost, not running, staying low. "I trained with him for 4 years. He has never given a false positive. Get her away from that vehicle right now." The bearded guard must have seen something in Logan's face because he stepped toward Celeste and put a hand on her arm. "Ma'am, let's just step back. I'm not going to be ordered around by some Celeste." The guard used her name, which surprised Logan a little. "Please." She went. Not without resistance. He could see it in the way she held herself, the set of her jaw. But she went, and the guards moved her back toward the elevator bank while Logan crouched next to Ghost and looked at what the dog had found. It was compact. Magnetic mount positioned against the frame rail where visual inspection would miss it, with what appeared to be a cellular trigger mechanism. It was professional work, the kind of work that had a signature to it if you knew what signatures looked like, and Logan had spent enough time with enough ordnance specialists to read this one. This wasn't improvised. This wasn't someone who was angry. This was someone who had planned. "Call 911, Logan said without raising his voice. "Tell them there is a suspected IED in the parking structure at—" He paused, looked at Celeste. "What's the building address?" 440 Meridian South, she said. Her voice was steady. He noted that. 440 Meridian South. Tell them to request the bomb disposal unit. Do not use the word emergency on the open line if you can avoid it. It'll flood the channel." The bearded guard was already on his phone. Celeste stood with her arms crossed over her chest, and she was looking at Logan with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't apology, though it had some of the architecture of one. It was something more complicated than either. "How do you know it's real?" she said. "I don't, yet, but Ghost does." "That's not—" "It's enough," Logan said. "Right now, it's enough." Teats. The bomb disposal unit took 19 minutes. Logan spent those 19 minutes crouched near the van, close enough to Ghost to feel the dog's warmth, but far enough from the SUV that he wasn't useful as shrapnel if he was wrong. He wasn't wrong. He knew he wasn't wrong, but the part of him that had learned not to trade in certainty stayed quiet. Celeste Ashford sat on the concrete floor with her back against the elevator doors, which struck him as unexpected. He had imagined her as someone who would stand throughout, who would keep her feet as a matter of principle. Instead, at some point between his third and fourth check of the garage entrance, she had simply sat down, knees up, looking at nothing in particular. She didn't look afraid. She looked like someone doing arithmetic on a problem she hadn't anticipated. The guard stood near her, and the bearded one, his name was Ramirez, Logan had heard by now, kept looking at his phone and then at the vehicle, and then at Logan in a way that suggested he was revising his opinion of the situation in real time. When the disposal team arrived, Logan met them at the garage entrance and walked them through what he'd found. The lead technician, a compact woman named Patel, listened without interrupting and then went in with her partner while Logan stayed back. 14 minutes later, she came out holding an evidence bag. "It's real," Patel said. "Cellular trigger, military-grade composition. Whoever placed this knew what they were doing." Logan nodded once. He'd known. But knowing and having it confirmed were different things, and the difference sat in his chest for a moment before he let it go. When he turned back toward the elevator bank, Celeste was standing again. She was watching him, and when he met her eyes, she didn't look away. "You saved my life," she said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't performed. It was said the way people said true things they hadn't had time to dress up. "Ghost saved your life," Logan said. "I was just in the way." She looked at the dog. Ghost was sitting beside Logan's leg, patient, already moving past it the way working dogs did. The mission was complete. He was waiting for the next thing. "I had security detain you," she said. "I know. I assumed you were—" She stopped. "It's a reasonable assumption," Logan said. He wasn't going to help her out of it. Not because he was angry. He wasn't, particularly. But because the shape of her mistake was something she should feel clearly, at least once, before the night moved on. "A stranger in your parking garage at midnight, I get it." She took that without deflecting, which raised his estimation of her slightly. "I'd like to understand how this happened," she said. "The device? How someone got into this facility?" "That's a longer conversation." "I'm aware." She looked at him steadily. "I'd like to have it." Logan looked at Ghost. The dog looked back at him with the expression he always had, which was not so much patient as perpetually ready. Logan thought about his son, asleep at his neighbor's apartment 20 minutes away, expecting Logan back by 1. He thought about the generator relay still sitting uncertified in the northeast corner of the garage. He thought about the fact that someone had put military-grade ordnance beneath this woman's vehicle and had done it cleanly enough that no camera had caught them. "Yeah," he said. "All right, chab." They used a conference room on the second floor because the garage was now a crime scene and would be for the foreseeable future. The building's security chief, a man named Hanks, who had arrived somewhere during the disposal team's work, sat at the head of the table with the expression of someone who knew his evening had just become his entire week. Celeste sat across from Logan. She'd gotten coffee from somewhere, not offered him any, which he didn't register as rudeness so much as distraction. She was already working. "Tell me what you noticed," she said, before Ghost alerted. "Anything." "I was under the panel housing," Logan said. "I didn't have eyes on the garage most of the time I was here. What I can tell you is that the device on your vehicle was placed with intention, magnetic mount on the frame rail behind the rear axle. The position would survive a visual walkaround. You'd need to get under it to find it, and most people don't get under their vehicles." "How long would placement take?" 60 to 90 seconds if you knew what you were doing. Hanks cleared his throat. "Our cameras. I'd look at your footage," Logan said, "but I'd look specifically for gaps." Hanks frowned. "What do you mean, gaps?" "I mean segments where the timestamp continues, but the image doesn't change. It's a simple loop injection. You replace a section of footage with a static frame. Anyone watching the live feed sees nothing. Anyone reviewing the recording afterwards sees nothing. You need system access to do it, but it's not a complicated technique." The room was quiet for a moment. Celeste put down her coffee cup. "You're saying someone with access to our internal security network?" "I'm saying it's worth checking. I could be wrong." She looked at him in a way that suggested she didn't think he was wrong. "Who are you?" she said. "Not the company. You." Logan considered the question. He'd been asked versions of it for most of his adult life. By commanding officers, by mission briefers, by the woman who had eventually stopped asking and left, and he'd gotten good at answering the part of it that was being asked and leaving the rest alone. "Logan Barrett. I was in the Navy, Special Operations. I got out 5 years ago when my son was born, and I decided he needed a father more than the Navy needed another SEAL." He said it plainly, without the note of sacrifice some veterans put in it. It was just a fact. "After I left, I did private security consulting for a while. Contract work, mostly overseas. Then my son started asking why I was never home, and I started this instead. He gestured vaguely in the direction of his van. Emergency backup systems, Celeste said. Emergency backup systems. She looked at him for a moment. And you can identify military-grade explosive devices. Most of them, yes. And the loop injection technique, how do you know that? Because I've used it, he said, in situations where we needed to move through a space that was under surveillance without leaving a record. The silence that followed had a particular quality, the kind that comes when something true has been said that changes the shape of a room. Celeste leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment, which was, Logan realized, how she thought. Not pacing, not fidgeting, just a brief vertical retreat from the horizontal plane of the problem. Then she came back. I need to know if there are more devices in this building, she said, and I need to know how someone got past our security infrastructure to place this one. And I need both of those things before 8 tomorrow morning when federal representatives will be walking through that front door. That's a lot for one night. I know. Logan looked at Ghost, who was lying under the conference table with his chin on his paws, technically resting, but with his ears still at work. The dog had nowhere to be. The dog was, Logan sometimes thought, the most emotionally uncomplicated being in his life. I can sweep the building, Logan said. Ghost can sweep it faster than any detection equipment you have access to in the next 6 hours. But I want to be clear about what I'm offering and what I'm not. I'm not your security team. I'm not on your payroll tonight, and whatever I find, I'm going to tell you honestly, whether or not it's what you want to hear. Celeste looked at him steadily. That's exactly what I want. All right, he said. Then let's start with your camera system. He stood, and Ghost rose with him, and the night, which had already been longer than anyone had planned, settled into a new shape. Quieter now, but not quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from the weight of what hasn't happened yet. Somewhere in this building, or in the infrastructure that connected it to the outside world, someone had left a door open. Logan had spent enough time in dark spaces to know that open doors didn't close themselves. He picked up his tool case and nodded toward the door. Show me where your server room is. The server room was on the 3rd floor, behind a keycard door and a secondary pin pad, which meant at least 2 layers of credential access and at least 2 people who had either used their own credentials or borrowed someone else's. Logan stood in front of the rack-mounted system display while Hanks pulled up the security log interface, and he did what he'd learned to do in cramped surveillance posts in places whose names he still didn't say out loud. He let his eyes go slightly unfocused and looked at the whole picture before he looked at any of the pieces. The system was good. Ashford Sentinel built security infrastructure for federal agencies, and their own internal setup reflected that, layered, compartmentalized, with redundant logging that was supposed to make tampering traceable. Supposed to. Pull the access log for the garage level, Logan said. Specifically the camera relay junction. That's the point of injection if someone looped the feed, Hanks typed. Celeste stood behind both of them with her coffee, which had to be cold by now. She didn't appear to notice. The log came up. Logan leaned forward. There, he said. He pointed to a timestamp cluster at 10:47 p.m. 11 minutes of logged activity with no corresponding event flags. The system recorded that the relay was accessed, but it didn't generate an anomaly alert. That could be routine maintenance, Hanks started. At 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, Logan said. It wasn't a question. Hanks was quiet. What credential was used? Celeste asked. Hanks scrolled. His face changed. It's showing Marcus Webb's badge ID. Marcus is in Denver, Celeste said immediately. He's been at the regional office since Monday. I know, Hanks said. Logan looked at the log entry again, then at the physical access reader mounted beside the door. Your badge system, does it cross-reference with your IP access logs? If Webb's credentials were used here at 10:47, was his system account active anywhere else simultaneously? Hanks opened a second window, and they had their answer in under 30 seconds. At 10:47 p.m., Marcus Webb's network credentials had been used to access a client file repository from a Denver IP address. Same minute, different city. Someone cloned his badge, Logan said, or accessed the credentialing system directly and generated a ghost entry, Celeste said. Her voice was even, but there was something underneath it. Not panic, more like the specific anger of someone watching a system they built being used against them. Which is worse, because that means they were already inside. Yes, Logan said. That's what that means. The room was quiet for a moment. Somewhere in the building, Logan could hear the distant movement of the bomb disposal team finishing their sweep of the lower levels. Ghost was sitting beside the server rack, and his ears were moving, cataloging sounds, finding nothing that needed reporting. Celeste set her coffee cup down on an empty equipment shelf. "How long have you been awake?" she said. Not to Hanks, to Logan. He thought about it. "Since 5. That's almost 20 hours. I've done longer." She looked at him with an expression he was starting to recognize. Not quite assessment, not quite something warmer than that. Somewhere in the middle distance between the two. "I need you to keep going," she said, "but I need to know you can." "I can," he said. Then, because it was true, and she'd asked honestly, "Ask me again in 3 hours." Something shifted in her expression, the edge of something that might have been the beginning of trust, though it was too early to call it that. "All right," she said. "Keep going." They swept the building floor by floor, Logan and Ghost working the spaces while Hanks followed with a tablet, logging each area as cleared. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Ghost found nothing. No additional devices, no chemical signatures that didn't belong. Whatever had been planted in the garage, in that one location, with that one purpose. That, Logan thought, was its own kind of information. By 3:30 in the morning, they were back in the conference room. Celeste had ordered food from somewhere, sandwiches and bottled water that appeared on the table without fanfare. And Logan ate because his body needed fuel, and there was no point in pretending otherwise. Ghost ate from a collapsible bowl Logan kept in his kit bag, methodically, without looking up. "One device," Logan said. "One point of access in the surveillance system. One cloned credential." "Efficient," Celeste said. "Yes, which matters." He turned his water bottle in his hands. "A bomb planted to kill you. The surveillance looped so the placement wasn't recorded. The access credential cloned from someone who wasn't in the building. This isn't rage. This isn't opportunistic. Whoever planned this had time to study your systems, your personnel schedules, your physical layout. Our layout isn't public." "No, it's not." She understood what he was saying. He watched her work through it, the precise, unhurried way she moved through an uncomfortable conclusion. "You think it was someone who had legitimate access to our systems?" she said. "I think it was someone who knew which credential to clone and who knew that Webb would be in Denver and his absence would create a plausible-looking window. That's a level of operational detail that doesn't come from hacking a public-facing system." "An insider. Or someone with an insider," Logan said, "which is functionally the same problem." Celeste was quiet for a long moment. Hanks was pretending to check his tablet, but he wasn't actually looking at it. "I have 43 employees with executive-level network access," she said. "Another 12 with physical access to the systems you're describing. That's too many to start with. What I'd narrow for is, who knew your schedule tonight? You came back to the building at..." He checked his own watch. "You arrived in the garage at approximately 11:40. That's not a random visit. What were you doing here?" She hesitated, just for a moment, but Logan caught it. "I came back for a document," she said. "I'd left the physical contract brief in my office. I don't like keeping that kind of material in a digital-only format when we're 24 hours from signing." "Did you tell anyone you were coming back?" "My assistant. And..." Another pause, shorter this time. "Victor. I texted Victor Sloan because I knew he was still working. He's my COO. He would have been monitoring the building's status overnight anyway." Logan didn't say anything right away. He looked at the table for a moment. A habit he'd developed not from uncertainty, but from the recognition that first reactions to important information should be given a second before they became words. "Who else?" he said. "That's everyone I told." "And your assistant, where are they now?" "Home. She left at 9. "Does your COO have executive-level system access?" "Of course he does," Celeste said. "He's my COO. Does he have reason to know Marcus Webb's schedule?" The question landed in the room with a particular weight. Celeste held it, and Logan could see the precise moment when she started to dislike where it was pointing. Not because she dismissed it, but because she didn't. "Victor would have access to everyone's travel schedules," she said carefully. "That's normal. He coordinates departmental operations. I know, Logan said. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm telling you what the geometry of this looks like, and you can do with that whatever you need to. Hanks put his tablet down. You're suggesting the COO of Ashford Sentinel arranged a bombing. I'm suggesting the list of people with enough inside knowledge to execute this cleanly is short, Logan said. And Victor Sloan is on it. Celeste sent Hanks out of the room at 4 in the morning on a pretext about coordinating with the disposal team's paperwork, and when the door closed, she sat for a long moment without speaking. Logan waited. He was good at waiting. It was possibly the thing he was best at, and he had never decided whether that was a professional skill or a personality defect. Victor has been with me for 6 years, she said finally. I know that doesn't make it impossible. No, she said. I know that too. She pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. He's been under stress lately. The contract negotiation has been... She stopped, redirected. There have been things I haven't told him, decisions I've made at the board level that would affect his position. If the federal contract goes through, I'm restructuring the executive team. He would have known it was coming. Logan didn't fill the silence. He has access to everything, she said. Every system, every schedule, every structural detail of this building. He knows my habits. He knows which nights I come back late. She looked at Logan directly. He knows I always walk to my own vehicle. I don't use the elevator with security. I have a thing about... She stopped. I just prefer to walk alone. And he would know that. Yes. Logan turned his water bottle again, just once. I want to look at his financial records, he said. Not the company's. His personal accounts. If someone paid him, there's a transaction somewhere, even if it's buried. I can't authorize that. I know you can't, but you could authorize your forensic accounting team to pull an irregular audit on executive compensation disbursements, which would legally require them to cross-reference with tax declarations, which would surface any significant undisclosed income in the last 18 months. She looked at him. You know how to do that. I know how to find things, he said. I spent 4 years finding things in places that were specifically designed to hide them. She nodded slowly, not at him, at some interior decision. I'll call our general counsel at 6. That's the earliest I can reach her without it becoming a thing. That works? There was a pause. Outside, the city was doing what cities did at 4 in the morning, existing at its lowest register, that brief window between the last of the night and the first of the day, when even traffic noise softened into something almost like breath. You have a son, Celeste said. It came out of nowhere, or seemed to. 7 years old, Logan said. His name is Miles. Is he... He's at my neighbor's. She watches him when I get called out late. He thinks I'm fixing generators, which isn't wrong. Does he know what you used to do? Logan thought about it. He knows I was in the Navy. He knows I had a job that was hard and that I don't do it anymore. He's 7, so mostly what he knows is that Ghost can shake hands and that I make decent pancakes. She almost smiled. It was quick, there and then reallocated somewhere more useful, but it had been there. What's he like? Loud, Logan said. Curious about everything. He's got a notebook where he writes down questions he wants to look up. Right now, he's deep into a phase about deep-sea creatures. I know more about anglerfish than any adult should. That sounds... She paused, looking for the right word, and settled on, nice. It is, he said, simply, without the self-consciousness that sometimes came with men talking about their kids. She looked at him for a moment, and whatever was in her expression was private enough that he didn't try to read it. Then she straightened in her chair and came back to the problem. I need to know if I'm safe to proceed with the signing ceremony, she said. Federal representatives will be here at 8. I have 40 people attending. The venue is the Meridian Convention Center, not this building. We moved it last week for capacity. Who arranged the venue change? A beat. Victor. Logan set his water bottle down. Then I need to see the Meridian's floor plan, he said, and I need to know every name on the attendance list. Molto. He called his neighbor, Carol, at 5 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been either awake or sleeping light enough that it didn't matter. Miles okay? Logan asked. Still out, Carol said. He was up late asking me about the life cycle of a vampire squid, so he earned it. You coming home? Not yet. Maybe by noon. He's got that thing at school. Logan closed his eyes briefly. The science fair. Miles had been working on a poster about bioluminescent organisms for 3 weeks. It was due at 2 p.m. Logan had promised to be there. I know, he said. I'll be there. Logan. I'll be there, Carol. She was quiet for a moment. She'd known him long enough not to push, but she'd also known him long enough to know when he meant it and when he was saying it because it was what needed to be said. She couldn't always tell the difference, and he knew that, and he carried the knowledge of it the way he carried most things, without putting it down exactly, just learning to balance it. Be careful, she said, and hung up. Logan sat in the corridor outside the conference room for a moment, phone in his hand, Ghost beside him. The building was quieter now. The disposal team had gone. Hanks was somewhere doing paperwork, and for a brief window it was just Logan and Ghost and the particular silence of a space that had recently held something dangerous and now held the absence of it. He thought about Miles, the notebook with the questions, the vampire squid. Then he put his phone in his pocket and went back inside. Isha. The Meridian Convention Center was 7 blocks from Ashford Sentinel's headquarters. Celeste pulled up the floor plan on her laptop and Logan studied it for 20 minutes without talking. Ghost slept under the table. The floor plan showed a main hall, 2 auxiliary rooms, a service corridor that ran behind the stage area, and 3 entry points, front entrance, a catering access door on the east side, and a freight elevator that connected to the underground parking structure. Underground parking. This venue was selected 6 days ago, Logan said. Victor brought it to me as a capacity solution. I approved it. Who coordinated with the venue's facilities team? His office would have the standard event logistics. Logan sat back. I need to go to the Meridian tonight, before the ceremony. It'll be staffed for setup, caterers, AV crew. I know. That's fine. I need Ghost to walk the space. He looked at her. And I need to know whether Victor has had any direct communication with the venue since the booking. I can't pull his communications without authorization. I'm not asking you to pull them. I'm asking whether you know of any, whether he mentioned speaking with the venue coordinator, whether there was a site visit you weren't included in. She thought. He went for a walkthrough on Thursday. He said it was routine. He asked if I wanted to come, and I said I had calls. Did he take anyone with him? I don't know. Logan nodded. He looked at the floor plan again, specifically the freight elevator, the underground lot that connected to the building's service infrastructure. The same type of space, the same type of access. This is the same playbook, he said. If I'm right about Sloan. Celeste was quiet. A device placed before the event, the signing ceremony as cover, enough public presence to create chaos and confusion. And then he stopped. And then what? He met her eyes. Then someone makes sure it looks like whoever foiled the last attempt was responsible for this one. It took her a second. Then, you. I'm already in the building's records as a contractor who was present during the first incident. My tools are in the facility log. My dog alerted on the device. If someone wanted to construct a narrative that pointed at me, the pieces are already there. Celeste stared at him. That's why the first bomb failed on purpose, she said slowly. Not to kill me in the garage. To create a witness. To create a suspect. I don't know that for certain, Logan said, but it fits. If it fits, then you're in danger. Yes, he said. And so is Miles. The word landed differently than the others. Celeste looked at him, not with the CEO expression, not with the woman running calculations expression, but with something more direct and less managed than either of those. Your son, she said. If someone knows who I am, and given what we're looking at, I have to assume they do, then they know I have a 7-year-old who goes to Riverside Elementary and participates in the science fair today at 2 o'clock. He said it evenly, because there was no way to say it that made it smaller than it was. I need to move him. I can arrange security. I'll arrange it, Logan said. I have people I trust. What I need from you is a secure location I can move him to for the next 24 hours while this resolves. She didn't hesitate. I have a property outside the city, a house near the lake, about 40 minutes north. Small staff, gated, private road. I'll call ahead. He looked at her. You're offering me your personal property. You're trying to protect your son, she said. I have a property. Those two facts seem relevant to each other. He studied her for a moment. This woman who had had his hands on a security guard's arm 3 hours ago and was now offering him her lake house. People showed you who they were in fragments, and the fragments didn't always line up the way you expected. Thank you, he said, and meant it. She nodded, already pulling out her phone. I'll make the call. By 6:30 in the morning, Carol had agreed to drive Miles to the lake property under the cover of a spontaneous field trip, framed for Miles as a secret nature research base, which he accepted without question and with considerable excitement. Logan had texted his contact in the federal field office, a man named Decker, who owed him a favor from a consulting job 2 years ago, and laid out what he had in broad strokes, enough to get unofficial eyes on the situation without triggering the kind of institutional machinery that would lock Logan out of the investigation and hand it to people who didn't know what they were looking at. Decker's response had been a single line. I'll be at the Meridian at noon. Don't move before then. Logan showed the message to Celeste. She read it and said nothing. At 7, Hanks came back in looking like a man who had done too much administration in too few hours and had coffee stains on his sleeve. He sat down and put his tablet on the table and said, I found something else. Logan looked at him. I pulled the full access log history for the past 60 days, Hanks said. There are 14 instances of off-hours relay access in the past 3 weeks. Different credential sets each time, different camera zones. Show me. Hanks turned the tablet around. Logan looked at the log entries and felt something settle in his chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more the particular cold clarity that came when a pattern became undeniable. 14 entries. 3 weeks. Different credentials, but the same timing windows, always between 10 and midnight, always in the 40-minute range. Someone's been mapping the system, Logan said, practicing the technique, finding which relay junctions were cleanest to inject. They've been inside our network for 3 weeks, Celeste said from across the table. Her voice was flat. At least, Logan said. The entries I can see only go back 60 days. The access point itself could be older. She stood up. She walked to the window, which looked out over the street, just beginning to fill with morning traffic, and stood there for a moment with her back to both of them. Logan let her have it. He understood the particular quality of that moment, when the scale of a betrayal moves from possible to real, and you have to stand there and hold it. 3 weeks, she said quietly. Yes. While I was negotiating the contract, while I was running board meetings and approving logistics and... She stopped. Started again. While Victor was sitting across from me in every one of those meetings. Neither Logan nor Hank said anything. She turned back from the window. Her face had resolved into something harder than what had been there before. Not colder, more concentrated, the way a flame gets when it has less air to work with. What do we do? She said. Logan looked at her steadily. We let the ceremony happen. She blinked. You want to let it proceed? If we cancel it now, Sloan knows we're onto him and disappears. If we proceed, he has to commit. Logan folded his hands on the table. But you're not going to be where he expects you to be. And Ghost and I are going to be at the Meridian at 7 this morning, now, before the setup crew finishes, before any guests arrive, before anyone puts anything in that building that isn't supposed to be there. Celeste looked at him for a long moment. The window was behind her now, morning light coming through, and she looked simultaneously exhausted and entirely awake, which was a specific kind of human state that Logan recognized from operational contexts where the body ran on emergency fuel and the mind refused to slow down. You're asking me to trust you, she said. I'm asking you to trust Ghost, Logan said. I'm just in the way. It was the second time he'd said it, and this time she caught the repetition. He could see it in her face. She almost said something and then didn't. All right, she said. Let's go. Ghost was already on his feet. Outside, the city was fully awake now, and 7 blocks away, the Meridian Convention Center was being arranged for a signing ceremony that its most dangerous attendee had spent 3 weeks preparing for. Logan put Ghost in the back of the van and pulled out of the parking structure into the early light, Celeste following in a company sedan, and the morning moved forward the way mornings do, without any particular concern for what was waiting inside it. The Meridian Convention Center was the kind of building that tried too hard. Vaulted ceilings, marble effect flooring that was actually composite, a lobby fountain that had been turned off for the event to reduce ambient noise. At 7 in the morning, it smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and fresh floral arrangements. And the setup crew was moving through it with the practiced efficiency of people who did this 3 times a week and didn't think about what the events were for. Logan walked in through the catering entrance on the east side, Ghost on a short lead beside him. He told the venue coordinator, a thin man named Purcell, who'd met them at the door with the particular anxiety of someone whose morning had already given him more variables than he'd planned for, that Ghost was a certified detection animal doing a pre-event security sweep. This was technically true. Purcell had looked at the dog, and then at Logan, and then at the federal contractor ID that Decker had sent to Logan's phone at 6:58 in the form of a digital credential, and he had stepped aside. Celeste had gone to her office to prepare for the ceremony and to maintain the appearance of a morning proceeding normally. Logan had told her not to tell Victor anything had changed, and she had agreed without argument. He didn't know if that was because she trusted his judgment or because she couldn't make herself have the conversation. Both were understandable. The main hall was large, high ceiling, a temporary stage at the north end, rows of chairs arranged in a shallow arc facing a podium and a long signing table. Flags behind the table, cameras on tripods at the room's perimeter, the kind that broadcast feeds to monitors in the lobby for overflow viewing. It was designed to look important, which it was. Logan walked Ghost through the room slowly, letting the dog set the pace. Ghost worked the perimeter first, the walls, the draping along the stage front, the legs of the signing table. He was unhurried and systematic in the way of an animal that had never once confused speed for thoroughness, and Logan stayed with him and watched his ears and watched his nose and watched the subtle angle of his head that changed when he found something and stayed the same when he didn't. 20 minutes through the main hall, nothing. They moved to the auxiliary rooms, one designated as a VIP holding area, one set up as a press station with monitors and a satellite uplink. Ghost moved through both. Nothing in the first. In the second, he paused near the base of the uplink equipment stack and circled it twice, and Logan crouched down and looked, and there was nothing physical, just the dog returning to it because something in the equipment's composite materials was throwing a partial signature. A false positive, which happened maybe twice a year with Ghost, and which Logan noted without frustration. It was information. It told him Ghost was working the full range of his detection threshold, which meant the negatives were reliable. They did the service corridor last. The service corridor ran behind the stage along the north wall, connecting the catering prep area to the freight elevator and the building's infrastructure utilities. It was the kind of space that event venues tried to keep invisible, functional and unglamorous, lit with fluorescent strips rather than the warm-toned fixtures in the main hall. It smelled different back here. Less flowers, more cleaning solution and metal. Ghost turned left at the freight elevator without Logan directing him. Logan let the lead go slack and followed. The elevator doors were closed. Ghost went past them to the utility alcove recessed into the wall beside the elevator shaft, a shallow space with a junction panel and 2 conduit runs that disappeared up through the ceiling. The alcove had a half door about 4 feet high, secured with a standard bolt latch. Ghost sat. Logan's stomach went the way it went in operational contexts. A specific tightening, not fear exactly, but the body's acknowledgement that the next 30 seconds were going to matter. He put on the nitrile gloves he kept in his kit bag, opened the half door, looked inside. The device was smaller than the one in the garage, more compact, differently constructed, but the cellular trigger mechanism was the same. Same design philosophy, same hands. He photographed it with his phone without moving it. Then he stood up and stepped back and let the half door rest against the latch, without closing it fully, and he called Decker. Decker answered on the first ring. "Tell me." "I've got a second device. Service corridor, north wall, utility alcove beside the freight elevator. Same trigger architecture as the garage. Whoever built the first one built this one. I'm 15 minutes out. Come in the east entrance and ask for Purcell. Don't come in through the front." Logan paused. "And Decker, I need you to bring someone who can run a real-time financial trace. I have a name." "A beat." "Victor Sloan?" "You've been looking at him." "We've been looking at the company," Decker said. Sloane's name came up in a different context 2 months ago. I'll explain when I get there. Logan stood in the service corridor and let that settle. 2 months ago. Which meant whatever Decker had, it predated the garage bombing by weeks. Which meant this had been in motion longer than last night's access logs suggested. He called Celeste. She answered before the first ring finished. Did you find something? Yes. North corridor, utility alcove. Ghost found it. The line was quiet for 2 seconds. The same builder, same trigger type. He kept his voice low. I need you to do exactly what we discussed. You attend the reception at 9. You sit in the pre-ceremony room with your federal contacts and you act like everything is proceeding. If Sloane asks you anything, you answer normally. Can you do that? Yes, she said. Then, Logan, be careful. He didn't have a good answer for that. He said, I'll call you when Decker arrives, and ended the call. Ghost was sitting beside him in the corridor, looking at nothing in particular. Logan crouched and put his hand on the dog's flank and felt the steady cadence of his breathing, unhurried, present, waiting for the next thing. 9 years old, gray around the muzzle now. He'd found 2 devices in 14 hours, and he still looked like he could go another 14. Good boy, Logan said quietly. Just that. Decker arrived at 7:40. He was mid-50s, built like a man who had once been athletic and had since made peace with not being, and he carried himself with the particular economy of movement of someone who had been doing serious work for a long time and had stopped needing to look like he was doing it. He came in through the east entrance with 2 agents and a woman Logan didn't know who carried a laptop and introduced herself as Nora Estes from the Financial Crimes Division. Logan walked them to the corridor. Decker looked at the device without touching it and said nothing for a moment, then took out his phone and photographed it from 4 angles. One of the agents got on a radio. Disposal? Logan asked. Already rolling, Decker said. They were staged 3 blocks out. He straightened up. You said the same builder. Trigger architecture is identical. The housing is different. This one's designed to fit the utility alcove, but the mechanism is the same. Either one person built both or 2 people were trained by the same third person. Decker nodded. Walk me through the rest. Logan walked him through it. The garage, the surveillance loop, the cloned credential, the 14 access entries over 3 weeks, the timeline that put Victor Sloane at the center of the operational knowledge required to execute both attempts. Decker listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Logan had always respected about him. Some investigators talked while they listened. Decker didn't. When Logan finished, Decker looked at Nora Estes. How fast can you run a 60-day trace on Sloane's personal accounts? I need system access and a judicial sign-off, she said. I can have the sign-off in 20 minutes if you call Judge Ferris directly. I'm calling her now, Decker said, already stepping away with his phone. He stopped and looked back at Logan. The other context I mentioned. 2 months ago, a financial analyst who works for a private equity firm named Graves Capital filed a tip with our white-collar unit, alleged that someone inside Ashford Sentinel was feeding proprietary contract intelligence to Graves Capital in exchange for an undisclosed payment structure. Logan held the name. Graves Capital. Ethan Graves runs a private equity operation, has been trying to acquire a competitor's stake in federal cybersecurity contracting for about 18 months. Ashford Sentinel winning this contract puts him effectively out of that market for the next 5 years. So Graves has motive. Graves has motive, financial capacity, and as of 2 months ago, an alleged inside source. Decker looked at him steadily. We didn't have enough to move on it. The tip was anonymous, and the analyst recanted a week later. We assumed Graves had gotten to them. Or Sloane had, Logan said. Or Sloane, Decker agreed. He stepped away to make the call. Logan stood in the service corridor and thought about the shape of it. Ethan Graves. A man Logan had never heard of until 30 seconds ago, sitting somewhere, an office, a house, somewhere clean and removed, while the operational pieces he'd put in place played out in this building. The device in the alcove, the cloned credentials, the narrative being constructed around Logan himself. All of it upstream of one man who had never needed to set foot in this building. The disposal team arrived at 8:15. They worked quietly and without drama, and the device was removed and contained within 22 minutes. Purcell hovered at the corridor entrance and was gently redirected by one of Decker's agents until he gave up and went to manage his catering staff instead. By 9 o'clock, the Meridian's main hall had been swept clean in both senses of the word. The disposal team was gone, and the building looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like, a venue preparing for an important ceremony. The setup crew finished the last of the chair arrangement. A florist adjusted centerpieces on the reception tables. An AV technician ran a mic check at the podium. Logan and Ghost were in the service corridor, which no one was using, which was the point. Victor Sloan arrived at 9:20. Logan watched him on the building's internal camera feed from a tablet Decker had configured, sitting on a folding chair in the service corridor with Ghost beside him. Sloan was in his late 40s, well-dressed in the considered way of men who use clothing to signal seriousness rather than taste. Silver at the temples. A confident walk, not aggressive, just the walk of a man who had spent 6 years being second in command of a company and had come to believe that position was load-bearing. He greeted the federal representatives in the lobby. He shook hands. He smiled. He put his hand briefly on the shoulder of a junior staff member who was carrying a stack of binders, the gesture of a man performing accessibility. Logan watched all of it. "He looks relaxed," said Decker's voice through the earpiece Logan was wearing. Decker was in a surveillance position in the press room. "He would be," Logan said quietly. "He thinks he's already won." "Estes got the sign-off," Decker said. "She's running the trace now." Initial read on Sloan's accounts shows a series of transfers from a holding entity registered in the Cayman Islands. 4 payments over 14 months. Total approximately $2.3 million. Logan exhaled slowly through his nose. There it was. The transaction you couldn't explain away. The kind that sat in a financial record like a stone in clear water, obvious once you knew to look for it. Does it connect to Graves? She's tracing the holding entity now. It'll take time to pierce the layers, but she says the registration pattern matches 3 other entities we already know are Graves connected. That's enough to move? It's enough to hold him, Decker said. Whether it's enough to charge depends on what else Estes finds in the next few hours. But we're past the point of maybe. Logan looked at the tablet. Sloan had moved from the lobby into the main hall and was speaking with Celeste, who had arrived with her general counsel and 2 federal contracting officials. Logan watched Celeste's face on the camera feed. She was doing it exactly right, which surprised him a little and then didn't. She was a person who, once she understood what was required, delivered it. She was listening to Sloan with the same focused attention she always brought to conversations, not a degree warmer or cooler than usual. Sloan, from the camera angle, looked comfortable. He looked like a man attending an event he'd planned, which, Logan thought, he had, just not the one Celeste thought she was running. At 9:50, Sloan excused himself from the group near the signing table and walked toward the service area. Logan watched him take out his phone as he pushed through the side door into the catering prep corridor. "He's moving," Decker said in Logan's ear. "I see it. Let him go. I want him to reach whoever he's calling." Logan stood up from the folding chair. Ghost stood with him. They moved deeper into the service corridor, away from the catering side, positioning behind the junction at the freight elevator. 30 feet away, through one closed door, Logan could hear the ambient noise of the catering prep. The clatter of trays, the voices of the serving staff. He couldn't hear Sloan's phone call, but Decker had audio on the corridor through a planted mic, and in Logan's earpiece he could hear the one-sided conversation beginning. He heard Sloan say, "We're on schedule." A pause. "The contractor is on site. That's fine. His presence is part of it." Another pause, longer. "The access is already configured. It doesn't matter whether he goes near it or not. The trigger logs his badge entry into the corridor." A brief pause. "Yes, both of them. The signing and the contractor. One narrative." Logan stood in the corridor with that in his ear and felt the cold clarification move through him the way it always had. Everything narrowing, everything becoming very simple and very clear. They had cloned his contractor badge. Sometime between Logan's arrival at Ashford Sentinel last night and this morning, someone had extracted his badge credential from the building's visitor log system and created a secondary entry that would place him, digitally, forensically, at the location of the device. When the device detonated during the signing ceremony, the evidence trail would show Logan Barrett, emergency systems contractor, accessing the utility alcove in the service corridor at a specific time. And Logan would be dead, and Celeste would be dead, and Victor Sloan would be a grieving COO who had narrowly survived the attack by being in the catering corridor when it happened. It was clean. Logan had to acknowledge that. It was genuinely clean work. "You have enough?" Logan said quietly into his mic. "I have enough," Decker said. "Moving now." Logan heard the press room door open on the audio feed. He heard Sloan's voice cut off mid-sentence. He heard Decker's voice say clear and flat. "Victor Sloan, federal agents, please end your call and keep your hands visible." There was a moment, a specific kind of moment that Logan had been present for enough times to know its texture, where the space between what a person had planned and what was actually happening became real to them. You could sometimes hear it in the quality of silence that followed an instruction like Decker's. Whether someone collapsed inward or expanded outward, in that moment told you a great deal about who they actually were under the version they'd constructed. Sloan said, "I don't know what you think." "Sir," Decker said, "hands." Logan didn't move. His job right now was to stay in the corridor and make sure that if anything had been missed, if there was a secondary contingency he hadn't accounted for, Ghost would find it first. He stood with the dog and listened to the audio and waited. It took 4 minutes. He counted them. Then Decker's voice came through. "Sloan is in custody. We've got his phone. He had an active call to a number registered to a shell company. Estes is already on it." Logan let out a slow breath. Ghost looked up at him. "The ceremony?" Logan asked. "I've informed the federal representatives that there was a security incident overnight that has been resolved. They've requested a 30-minute recess to consult their protocols. My read is they proceed." A pause. "Celeste Ashford is asking for you." "Where is she?" "Pre-ceremony room, north end of the main hall." Logan looked down at Ghost. The dog was calm, not relaxed, but the alert, ready calm of an animal whose instincts had been validated and who was now waiting to see what came next. His ears moved once toward the main hall and then stilled. They walked through the service corridor to the side entrance of the pre-ceremony room. Logan knocked once and opened the door. Celeste was standing by the window, the same posture she'd had in the conference room at 4 in the morning, back to the room, facing outside. She turned when Logan came in. There were 2 other people in the room, her general counsel and one of the federal representatives, and they looked at Logan with the expression of people who had been told something significant and were in the process of deciding how to arrange their faces around it. "Give us a minute," Celeste said, and they went without argument, which told Logan something about how she ran her organization even in the middle of a crisis. When the door closed, she looked at him. She didn't say anything for a moment. Her expression was doing several things at once: processing, reordering, the specific work of a mind that had spent years building something and was now holding the knowledge that the person sitting across from her at every executive meeting for 6 years had been systematically trying to destroy it. "They got him," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "And there was a device here." "Yes, Ghost found it in the service corridor. It was placed in a utility alcove beside the freight elevator." He paused. "They also cloned my contractor badge. The trigger was configured to log my credential as the placement event." She closed her eyes briefly. Just briefly. "They were going to frame you." "While I was dead," Logan said. "Yes." She opened her eyes. "Ethan Graves?" "Decker's Financial Crimes Unit is tracing the payment structure now. They have enough to hold Sloan. Whether they can connect Graves directly depends on what Sloan decides to do with his next few hours." "He'll talk," Celeste said. She said it with the certainty of someone who had watched people manage risk calculations for a decade. "Victor is not a man who accepts consequences alone. If there's someone above him, he'll give them up." Logan thought she was probably right. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked at the window. 6 years, she said. Every board meeting, every strategic review, every time I made a decision I didn't tell the full team about, he was there taking notes. She paused. I told him about the restructuring, not the details, but enough. I told him his role would change after the contract. When? 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. The same window as the first surveillance access entries. Logan didn't say it. She already knew. The restructuring wasn't punitive, she said. I was expanding the operation. His role would have changed because the company was growing, not because I was... She stopped, shook her head. It doesn't matter now why I did it. No, Logan said. It doesn't. She looked at him. Do you think he always intended this, or do you think I... Don't, Logan said, quietly, but clearly. She looked at him. You didn't make him do this, he said. Whatever decision he made it. The restructuring was the excuse he found, not the reason. She held that. He could see her holding it, turning it over, checking it for the comfort that would make it suspect, finding that it wasn't comfortable so much as simply true. That was the distinction that mattered. Your son, she said, he's at the lake property with my neighbor. He's probably been awake since 6, cataloging the local amphibian population. Logan said it without the strain that had been under everything since 5 in the morning because the weight had shifted. Miles was safe. That was the floor under everything else. Something changed in Celeste's expression, a softening that wasn't weakness, more like the moment when a structure under enormous lateral load finally gets adequate bracing and can afford to breathe. I want him to stay, she said, until this is fully resolved, both of them. Logan looked at her. I know I don't have standing to insist on it, she said. I'm not insisting, I'm asking. He was quiet for a moment. In the main hall beyond the closed door, he could hear movement. Staff, probably. The ceremony reassembling itself. The federal representatives recalibrating their posture toward a proceeding that was about to happen after all. I'll call Carol, he said. Celeste nodded. She uncrossed her arms and seemed to arrive back in herself in a more complete way than she had since they'd entered this room. Whatever had been displaced by the last 12 hours finding its way back to its proper location. She straightened her jacket, looked at Logan one more time. Thank you, she said. It came out differently than the same words had in the garage. In the garage, it had been the automatic response to an undeniable fact. This version was more considered, more personal. Logan nodded. He didn't deflect it this time. She opened the door and walked back into the work of her life. The contracts, the ceremony, the federal representatives waiting in the main hall with their careful expressions. She walked with the same economy of movement she'd had since midnight, a little frayed now at the edges, but structurally sound. Logan stayed in the doorway for a moment. Ghost pressed against his leg briefly, the way the dog sometimes did, not seeking attention, just registering presence. Logan put his hand on the dog's head and then stepped back into the corridor. At 10:45, Nora Estes confirmed the first layer of the holding entity's ownership structure. It connected to a management company registered in Delaware that Graves Capital used as a secondary entity for real estate transactions. It wasn't a direct line yet. There were more layers to peel, but it was the kind of breadcrumb that, once found, had a way of leading somewhere. Decker texted. Sloan's asked for his lawyer. Give it 2 hours. He'll start talking by noon. Logan sat in the service corridor with his back against the wall and Ghost across his feet and his phone in his hand. He had a text from Carol. Miles found a painted turtle. He's named it Admiral. I don't have the heart to tell him we're not keeping it. He looked at that for a moment and felt something in his chest that was too ordinary to name, just the fact of it, the persistence of ordinary things in the middle of everything else. He typed back, Tell Admiral he's got a temporary commission. We'll negotiate rank later. Through the service corridor door, he could hear the ceremony beginning, the sound of a room full of people settling into their chairs, the particular hush that comes before something formal starts. A microphone being adjusted, someone at the podium beginning to speak. The contract was going to be signed. Celeste was in that room. Victor Sloan was in a federal vehicle 3 blocks away. And somewhere in a clean office in a city Logan didn't yet know, a man named Ethan Graves was waiting for a phone call that was never going to come. Logan leaned his head back against the concrete wall. He was tired in a way that sat in the bones rather than the muscles, the kind of tired you only got after the thing you'd been keeping at bay had finally been contained. Ghost was warm across his feet, and the corridor was quiet, and the ceremony went forward on the other side of the door, and for a few minutes Logan let himself simply be where he was. The work wasn't finished. He knew that. Sloan would talk, or he wouldn't, and Graves would be reachable, or he'd prove slippery and there would be more documentation and more testimony and more of the slow institutional process that turned evidence into consequence. Logan had been through enough of that process to know it was neither clean nor fast. But the device was gone. The man who had placed it was in custody, and Miles was at a lake house naming a turtle. That was enough. For this moment, in this corridor, that was enough. Decker was right about the timeline, but wrong about the duration. Sloan didn't wait until noon. He started talking at 11:17, 43 minutes after his attorney arrived at the federal field office on Crestline Avenue, which meant the attorney had taken one look at what Estes had assembled and advised his client that cooperation was the only architecture left standing. Logan heard about it from Decker in a text at 11:22, sitting in his van in the Meridian service lot with the engine running for heat, and Ghost in the back working through a chew that Logan kept in the kit bag for post-mission downtime. The text said, "He's giving us Graves. Full structure. Get some sleep if you can." Logan looked at that last line for a moment. Get some sleep. As if sleep was a thing you simply decided to do, like switching off a lamp. He drove back to Ashford Sentinel's headquarters because Decker needed him to walk through the surveillance log findings one more time with Estes on record, and because Celeste had sent a message saying the federal signing had concluded and asking if he could come by when he had a chance, which was the kind of phrasing that covered a significant range of possible conversations, and Logan wasn't sure which one he was walking into. The headquarters building was different in the late morning. The lobby had people in it, staff moving between floors, the ordinary business of a company proceeding with its day. The garage was still cordoned off, yellow tape across the entrance, but upstairs everything looked functional. Logan found that faintly surreal, the way operational spaces always looked afterward. The same dimensions, the same furniture, none of the weight that had filled them the night before. He met with Estes for 40 minutes in a small conference room on the 4th floor, walking through the access log timestamps and the credential cloning methodology while she recorded and took notes in the particular shorthand of someone who had done this kind enough times to develop her own system. She was precise and unimpressed by things that weren't relevant, which Logan respected. She thanked him at the end with a handshake that was businesslike without being cold. Then he went looking for Celeste. She was in her actual office, which Logan had not been in before, a corner room on the 6th floor with windows on 2 sides, and a desk that was covered in the organized chaos of someone who worked from paper as much as from screens. She was on the phone when he appeared in the doorway, and she held up one finger without looking at him and kept talking. Logan leaned against the doorframe and waited. Ghost sat on the floor and looked at the room with the mild interest he brought to all new spaces. Celeste ended the call and set her phone face down on the desk. She looked like someone who had been awake for 30 hours and had arrived at the stage beyond tired, where the body simply runs on its own logic and stops asking permission. Her blazer was gone. There were the papers everywhere, and 2 empty coffee cups and a half-eaten granola bar on the edge of the desk that suggested she'd remembered she needed to eat and then forgotten to finish. "Sloan is talking," Logan said. "I know. Decker called me directly." She leaned back in her chair. "He's giving them everything. The payment schedule, the contact protocol with Graves, the technical details of the surveillance access, everything." "Good." Graves's attorneys have already issued a statement saying their client has no knowledge of the alleged activities and is cooperating fully with any inquiry. She said it in the flat recitative tone of someone reading from a script they found contemptible, which means Graves has been on the phone with his legal team since before Sloan was even in the vehicle. "He would have had a protocol for this," Logan said. "Someone at that operational level doesn't run this kind of thing without exit architecture." "Will they get him?" Logan considered it honestly. Estes is good. Decker is thorough. If Sloan's financial records hold and the holding entity layers out to Graves directly, they'll have enough. The question is whether Graves has a cutout somewhere in the middle that creates deniability. And if he does, then it takes longer and costs more, and eventually they probably still get him, but probably isn't certain. He paused. "I'm sorry, that's the honest answer." She looked at him steadily. "I prefer honest answers." "I know you do." Something in the room settled. Outside the windows, the city was doing its midday thing. Traffic, clouds moving, the ordinary scale of a Wednesday that had nothing to do with any of this. "The contract is signed," she said. "I heard." The federal representatives were, she searched for the word, professional. They acknowledged the security incident. They were satisfied with the resolution. They signed. She said it with something that was less triumph than relief, which was the more accurate emotion for surviving something rather than winning something. "Congratulations," Logan said. He meant it simply. She looked at him for a moment. "I keep thinking about the 14 access entries," she said. 3 weeks of Victor sitting in meetings with me while he was already... She stopped. "I didn't see it." "He was good at it," Logan said. "That's not a failure of your judgment. It's a function of how long he'd been doing it." "I should have seen it." "Maybe," Logan said, "but probably not. People who do this at this level are specifically skilled at being invisible in plain sight. It's a trained behavior. It doesn't respond to ordinary vigilance." She heard that. She didn't dismiss it, but she didn't fully accept it either, and Logan didn't push. There were things people needed to hold on to, the belief that they should have known, the inventory of missed signals, and trying to take that from someone before they'd finished with it was its own kind of presumption. "I'm restructuring the executive team," she said, "effective immediately. I'm also bringing in an independent security audit team to review everything Sloan had access to. Every system, every protocol, every internal access credential in the company." "That's the right call." "It's going to cost..." She stopped. "It doesn't matter what it costs." "No," Logan said. "It doesn't." She looked at him with an expression that had several things in it at once. The exhaustion, and underneath the exhaustion, something more durable, the core of someone who had built a company from a rented server room and a maxed-out card and had survived a conspiracy to destroy it and was already, even now, thinking about what came next. "I'd like to offer you a position," she said. Logan had been expecting something like this and had been composing his answer since approximately the Meridian service corridor. "I appreciate that," he said. "But no." She studied him. "I haven't said what the position is." "It doesn't matter what the position is. You don't know that." "I know that whatever it is, I'm not the right person for it," Logan said. He said it without apology, which was the only way to say it without it sounding like one. "I'm not built for the inside of an organization. I haven't been for a long time. I do better when I can walk away from the thing when it's done." "You could write your own parameters." "I know, and I'm still saying no." He let that sit for a beat, then, "What I can do is refer you to people I trust for the security audit. People who do exactly what you need and who won't be compromised by being too close to the existing structure." She took that, not without some resistance. He could see it in the way she held herself for a moment, but she took it. "Give me the names," she said. "I'll send them tonight." He meant to leave then. He had Miles to think about, and Carol, and the science fair that had passed without him, a fact he'd been carrying for the last 2 hours with the particular low-grade heaviness of a kept promise that got broken anyway. He needed to get to the lake property. He needed to see his son. But Celeste said, "How's Miles?" And he stayed a few minutes longer. "He's good," Logan said. "Carol says he's adopted a painted turtle." "What's the turtle's name?" "Admiral." She almost smiled, the same way she'd almost smiled in the conference room at 4 a.m. Brief, private, not performed. "That's a good name for a turtle." "He names everything," Logan said. "Every creature, every rock he finds, every significant tree in our neighborhood. The oak on the corner of our street is named Franklin. I don't know why Franklin." "Did you ask him?" "He said it looked like a Franklin. I don't know what that means." This time she did smile, fully, without pulling it back, and it changed her face in the way that full, unguarded expressions always did, like a room when someone opens a window. Logan looked at her for a moment. He thought about the woman who had come into the parking garage at midnight with her phone raised and her jaw set, who had watched her own vehicle be treated as a crime scene and had sat on the concrete floor and worked the problem rather than falling apart, who had held herself together through 14 hours of systematic betrayal by someone she'd trusted for 6 years. She hadn't done it seamlessly. She'd flinched in places and gotten angry in other places. And at one point, at around 4 a.m, she had put her coffee cup down with slightly more force than she intended. None of that was weakness. It was just the actual texture of being a person under pressure, and Logan had been around enough people under pressure to know the difference between the ones who held and the ones who didn't. She held. "I need to go get my son," he said. She nodded. "Of course." He pushed off from the doorframe, and Ghost stood with him. and he was almost into the corridor when she said his name. He turned. "I'm sorry," she said. "For the garage. For what I assumed." He looked at her. The apology was clean, no qualification, no defensive addition, and he'd been waiting without knowing he was waiting to see if she could do it that way. "Already passed it," he said. The drive to the lake property took 40 minutes north of the city on a 2-lane road that moved through farmland and then tree cover and then opened up briefly before a gated entrance with a modest stone pillar and a call box. Logan had the access code from Celeste's text. The gate opened. He drove another quarter-mile on a gravel private road through enough trees that you forgot a city was 40 minutes behind you. The house was smaller than he'd expected. A lake house in the literal sense, not large, built close to the water with a covered porch running across the front. A property manager named Gill had opened the gate from a secondary structure and waved Logan through with the economy of a man who didn't need things explained twice. Carol was on the porch when he pulled up. She was 53, built like someone who had raised 3 kids and kept a large vegetable garden, and neither activity had made her soft. She watched Logan park and get out of the van, and she looked at his face for a moment the way she always did when he came back from something. Not searching for injuries exactly, more taking inventory of what he'd spent. "You look terrible," she said. "I know." "Miles is at the dock." Logan looked past the house. Through the trees he could see a sliver of the lake, gray-green, moving. He heard, distantly, the sound of a 7-year-old explaining something to someone who wasn't responding, either to Carol's phone, which he'd probably borrowed, or to Admiral. "How was the science fair?" Logan asked. Carol looked at him. "He was fine, Logan. I took photos." His poster on bioluminescent organisms won 2nd place, and he was mad about it for about 11 minutes, and then completely forgot because there was a beetle on the floor of the gymnasium. "Did he ask about me?" Carol didn't answer that right away, which was its own answer. "He said you had to fix something important," she said. "He's 7. He understands more than you think and less than you worry about." Logan looked at the water. "I'll make it right with him." "You always do," she said, not as a compliment exactly, more as a plain fact, the kind that had both good and difficult things inside it. He walked around the side of the house to the dock. The dock was maybe 30 feet long, weathered wood, extending out over the water. Miles was sitting at the end of it, cross-legged, holding a mason jar with holes punched in the lid that contained, Logan assumed, Admiral. He was talking to the jar in the particular tone he used for educational explanations. The same tone he'd used since he was 4, as if the entire world were a classroom that hadn't been organized properly yet, and he was doing his best to fix that. Ghost went ahead. The dog's nails on the dock planks made a sound, and Miles turned around. "Dad?" The way he said it, not a question, just the word, with the full weight of recognition, was one of those sounds that Logan didn't know how to prepare for, no matter how many times he heard it. Miles got up from the dock and came down it at speed, still holding the mason jar with both hands so Admiral wouldn't slosh. And he made it to Logan in about 4 running steps and wrapped one arm around Logan's waist because the other hand was occupied with turtle custody. Logan put his hand on the back of Miles's head. His sun was warm and smelled like lake water and sunscreen and the particular smell of a kid who had been outside for most of a day. "I heard you found a turtle," Logan said. Miles pulled back and held up the jar. Inside it, Admiral was doing what turtles do when they're in mason jars, which is mostly nothing, but with a certain dignified patience. "He's a painted turtle, eastern subspecies. He's got the yellow stripe configuration on his neck, which indicates he's probably 2 to 3 years old. I didn't stress him. I've been keeping the jar near the water's edge, and I gave him some vegetation." "Good practice," Logan said. "I'm going to release him before we leave. I just wanted to study him first." Miles looked at Ghost, who was examining the dock's edge with professional interest. "Is everything okay?" Logan looked at his son. Miles had his mother's eyes, brown, quick, and Logan's stubbornness, which had so far manifested as an inability to accept 2nd place at science fairs without a 14-minute negotiation period, and a strong personal theory about why the judging criteria had been misapplied. "Everything's okay," Logan said. "I'm sorry I missed the fair." Miles looked at him with the expression of a 7-year-old performing magnanimity, which was recognizable by the slight overcorrection in the eyebrows. Carol said you had an important job. I did. Did you fix the generator? Not exactly, Logan said, but I fixed something. Miles accepted this with the pragmatic flexibility of a child who had learned that his father's work existed in a category that didn't always map onto ordinary vocabulary. He looked back at the jar. Can we eat dinner here? Carol said there might be fish. We can stay tonight, Logan said. Miles's face did the thing it did, a quick recalibration from normal to pleased, like a dial turning. And then he was talking about fish and Admiral's release protocol and whether Ghost could be trusted near the water's edge all at once. And Logan let the sound of it move through him the way he let very few things move through him. He sat on the dock beside his son as the afternoon moved through its lower register, and Ghost settled between them, and Admiral waited patiently in his jar for his commission to end. Decker called at 3:15. Logan stepped off the dock and walked up the slope toward the house, leaving Miles engaged in the formal ceremony of Admiral's release, which apparently required a brief statement. Graves's attorneys folded, Decker said without preamble. About an hour ago. They'd seen enough of what Estes had on the holding entity structure, and they knew Sloan was giving us the full payment architecture. They issued a statement saying Graves would cooperate with the investigation and make himself available for interview, which is attorney speak for he's negotiating terms. He'll take a deal, Logan said. Probably. A man like Graves doesn't go to trial if he can avoid it. Too much public exposure, too much he can't control. He'll give up the subsidiary network, accept a financial penalty, and probably walk with a suspended sentence and a prohibition from federal contracting for some number of years. That's not enough, Logan said. No, Decker said. It's probably not, but it's what the evidence structure supports unless Sloan gives us something more direct. We're working on it. Logan looked out at the water. Miles was at the dock's edge now, holding the jar tilted toward the surface. Ghost was standing beside him, watching the water with focused attention. The turtle was a dark shape dropping into the green. My name, Logan said. The badge credential they used. Is that going to require a formal process? I'm handling it personally, Decker said. I've already flagged the cloned credential with the contractor registry and we've issued a corrective notation on the access log. Your name won't appear in any public documentation as a suspect or a person of interest. It'll show you as a cooperating security consultant who identified both devices. Thank you. Logan. Decker's voice shifted slightly, not softer, more direct. What you did in that building last night, the surveillance work, the device identification, the counterframing, that's... He paused, and Logan could hear him deciding how much further to go. Not everyone could have done that. Ghost did most of it. Stop deflecting, Decker said, and there was enough edge in it to be genuine. Logan was quiet for a moment. Down at the dock, Miles had let the turtle go and was watching the water with the specific intensity of a kid who was already composing what he was going to write in his notebook. I'm going to be with my son, Logan said. We'll talk next week about the formal documentation. Take the time, Decker said. You've earned it. Logan ended the call and stood on the slope above the lake and breathed the air, which was cool and carried the smell of pine and water and late afternoon light. He was tired in a way that was almost physical pleasure, the exhaustion of having given everything a thing required and come out the other side with the things that mattered still intact. Ghost came up the slope from the dock, not called, just done with the water's edge, and sat beside Logan with his shoulder against Logan's leg. The gray in the dog's muzzle caught the light. Logan put his hand on Ghost's head. Good mission, he said quietly. Ghost leaned into the hand briefly and then looked back toward the water with the equanimity of an animal for whom the space between a completed task and the next one was simply the present moment, and the present moment was enough. That evening, Celeste texted at 7:42. The federal team is satisfied. Formal confirmation comes in writing tomorrow, but the contract stands. I wanted you to know. Logan was at the kitchen table watching Miles eat soup and argue with Carol about whether Admiral would remember him if they ever encountered each other again in the wild, which Miles believed was a real possibility based on painted turtle behavioral studies, and Carol believed was optimistic. He texted back, Good. Congratulations. A minute passed. Then, how is Miles? Logan looked up at his son, who was now explaining territorial mapping in painted turtles to Carol, who was nodding with the expression of someone who had agreed to a conversation they were not going to win. Spent the afternoon cataloging the local amphibian population and holding a formal release ceremony for a turtle named Admiral. He's fine. The response took a few minutes. When it came, it was, "That sounds like exactly the right way to spend a day." Logan looked at that for a moment, then set his phone face down on the table and watched his son eat soup. After dinner, he walked down to the dock with Miles while Carol cleaned up over the sound of a radio program she liked. The lake was dark now, the far shore a black tree line against a sky that still held some residual light at the western edge. Miles sat with his legs hanging over the dock's end, notebook open on his knee, writing something in the particular labored cursive that was his current handwriting. Not bad for 7, Logan thought, but earnest in the way of someone who was working harder at letter formation than at the words. "What are you writing?" Logan asked. "Questions for later," Miles said without looking up. "I want to know if painted turtles have individual personalities, or if they all behave the same." Admiral seemed calm. "I want to know if that's a trait or just him." "Good question." "Do you think it's a good question, or are you just saying that?" Logan looked at his son. "I think it's a good question," he said. "Individual variation in animals used to be assumed to be just noise, random behavior, but there's research suggesting that individual personality traits are more consistent and more significant than previously understood, even in animals that seem simple." Miles wrote something. "Even turtles? Probably even turtles." Miles nodded with the satisfied expression of someone whose hypothesis had been supported by an authority they respected. He kept writing. Logan sat beside him on the dock. The water moved below them, dark and quiet, and Ghost lay at the edge where the dock met the slope and watched the tree line across the lake with the steady attention of an animal who understood that darkness was just a different kind of visibility. "Dad," Miles said. "Yeah, were you in danger?" Logan looked at the water. He'd known this was coming, had known it since the dock in the afternoon, from the way Miles had watched him when he first arrived. The quality of attention that children directed at parents when they'd sensed something and were waiting for the right moment to put it into words. He could deflect. He'd deflected before, not dishonestly. Miles was 7, and some truths had weight that a 7-year-old couldn't distribute properly yet. But deflecting tonight felt wrong. It felt like the wrong thing to do with what the last 24 hours had been. "A little," Logan said. "Yes." Miles continued to look at the water, writing nothing now, just holding his pen above the page. "But you're okay." "I'm okay." "And Ghost is okay." "Ghost is better than okay. Ghost is the reason I'm okay." Miles looked at the dog. Ghost was still watching the tree line. "I know," Miles said. He said it with the particular quiet of a kid who has already understood something and has been waiting for the adult to catch up. Logan put his arm around his son's shoulders. Miles leaned into it, briefly, and then pulled back in the way of 7-year-olds who are simultaneously still young enough to want that and old enough to have opinions about it, and picked up his pen again. "Can we come back here?" Miles asked. "To this place." "Maybe," Logan said. "I liked it." He paused. "Whose house is it?" "Someone I met last night." Miles considered this with the focused lateral thinking of a kid who was good at connecting things. "The important job," he said. "Yes." "Is she nice?" Logan looked at his son. "What makes you think it's a she?" Miles shrugged with the casual confidence of someone who had arrived at a conclusion by a route he considered self-evident. "Because Carol said the person who offered us the house was very thoughtful." Carol doesn't say that about people she doesn't think are worth saying it about. Logan didn't have an immediate answer for that, which was unusual. He looked at the water again. "She's..." He started, and stopped, and started again. "Yes," he said. "She's nice." Miles wrote something in his notebook. Logan didn't ask what. Whatever 7-year-olds wrote down about their father's answers to careful questions was probably better left as a private record. The water moved. Somewhere across the lake, something surfaced briefly and was gone. Ghost tracked it without alarm. Logan sat on the dock with his son in the dark and let the night be what it was. A night after a hard thing with the people who mattered close enough to touch, and the water moving below and nothing demanding anything from any of them for exactly this long. He thought about what Decker had said. You've earned it. He'd never been comfortable with that framing. Earned implied a transaction, and he'd never understood his life as a transaction. The things he did in exchange for the things that mattered. Miles wasn't a reward for service. Ghost wasn't compensation. The ability to sit on a dock and watch the dark water wasn't something he'd traded for. It was just what was there. You got to have it, or you didn't. And if you got to have it, you tried to be equal to it. Miles eventually started to yawn, which he did with the full-body commitment of a kid who had been outside for most of a day and was now discovering the bill. Logan stood, and Miles stood with him, tucking the notebook under his arm, and they walked up the slope toward the house where the kitchen light was on, and Carol had left the porch lamp burning. At the door, Miles stopped and looked back at the dock. "Do you think Admiral knows he's free?" he asked. Logan looked at the water. "I think he knows where he is," he said. "I think that's enough." Miles thought about this with the seriousness he brought to questions he was still working through, and then he nodded and went inside, and Logan followed. And Ghost came up the slope behind them both and settled in the doorway as the door closed against the night. The formal documentation arrived on a Thursday, 6 days after the signing ceremony, in a manila envelope addressed to Logan Barrett, care of Cascade Emergency Systems. It contained 3 pages, a letter from the Federal Contracting Office confirming that Logan's presence at both Ashford Sentinel headquarters and the Meridian Convention Center had been as a cooperating security consultant, a separate notation clearing his contractor credential of any association with the cloned badge entry, and a brief addendum from Decker's office stating that his assistance had been instrumental in preventing what would have been a significant act of domestic economic sabotage. Logan read it at his kitchen table before Miles was awake. He read it twice, then folded it back into the envelope and put it on the stack of mail he dealt with on Fridays, between a utility bill and a parts catalog for generator components. Then he made coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched the yard come into the early light. He'd been home for 5 days. The transition back had been the same as it always was after operational work. Not difficult, exactly, but requiring a kind of deliberate recalibration, like adjusting your eyes after coming in from bright sun. The scale changed. The stakes changed. The things that had felt urgent were replaced by the things that were simply present, and the things that were simply present, Miles's breakfast, the notebook questions, Ghost's morning routine, the particular quality of a Tuesday morning in a house that belonged to them, were not smaller than what had come before. They were just differently weighted. Victor Sloan had been formally charged on 6 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, corporate espionage, and financial fraud. His attorney had negotiated a cooperation agreement that required full disclosure of his relationship with Graves Capital and its principals. The preliminary hearing had been set for the following month. Ethan Graves had, as Decker predicted, negotiated. His attorneys had entered discussions with the federal prosecutor's office, and the initial terms, financial penalty, prohibition from federal contracting for 15 years, suspended sentence contingent on full cooperation, were reported in the financial press with the careful language of sources familiar with the matter. Logan had read the coverage once, in a waiting room, and hadn't looked for it again. Graves would pay a price that was less than what he'd attempted to take. That was the reality of it, and Logan had enough experience with the gap between justice and consequence to carry it without needing to make peace with it. What mattered, when he laid it out plainly, was this. The contract stood. The company was intact. No one had died, and his name was clean. Those were the facts. He kept coming back to them when the other thoughts got loud. He'd sent Celeste the names of 3 independent security audit firms, as promised, 2 days after returning home. She'd responded within the hour with a short acknowledgement and a question about one of the firm's specialization in network forensics. They'd exchanged 4 messages: practical, specific, the communication of 2 people who had been through something together and were now navigating what that meant in ordinary light. On the 5th day, she'd texted, "The audit team starts Monday. I wanted to tell you the restructuring is going ahead. Different than I originally planned. Broader, actually. I'm building something different than what I had." He'd written back, "Good." She'd written, "I'm not sure good covers it, but it's a start." He'd looked at that for a longer time than it probably warranted. Ghost's retirement became official on a Saturday in October, though the word retirement required some negotiation with reality because ghosts didn't retire the way humans retired, with ceremony and a shift into leisure. He simply continued to be himself, only now without the formal structure of deployment. He still walked the perimeter of whatever space he was in. He still tracked sounds with those ears. He still sat at the end of Logan's bed at night, listening to the house breathe. The difference was that no one needed him to report what he found. And over the weeks that followed, something in him seemed to recognize this. A loosening, very gradual, like a cable under tension that was slowly, incrementally, being allowed to go slack. Logan marked it the day Ghost declined to track a rabbit in the backyard. Just watched it go without moving, and then looked at Logan with an expression that was, as far as Logan could interpret such things, satisfied. Not resigned. Satisfied. There was a difference. Miles threw Ghost a small party, which consisted of a dog-appropriate cake from the pet supply store and a new bed positioned precisely where Miles had determined the optimal sun exposure was, based on a week of personal observation with a compass and a notebook. Ghost lay on the new bed and accepted a piece of cake with dignity and slept in the afternoon sun for 2 hours. Logan watched all of this from the porch and felt something that resisted clean naming, the particular weight of gratitude that arrives when you understand concretely what you were close to losing. Ghost in the sunlight, Miles at the table, the ordinary, unremarkable persistence of things. Yet, Celeste came to the lake house in November. Not Celeste's lake house, Logan's lake. A different one entirely, 40 minutes in a different direction, where Logan had a standing agreement with a property owner he'd done work for to use the dock in the off-season. He'd taken Miles there twice before. It was smaller and less managed than Celeste's property, with a dock that needed boards replaced and a shoreline that was mostly mud and cattails, and Miles preferred it to the manicured version for reasons he had articulated clearly in his notebook and summarized as more organisms per square foot. It had been Miles who asked about Celeste, in the way Miles asked about most things, obliquely, while apparently occupied with something else. They had been driving back from the hardware store, Miles in the passenger seat with a bag of small nails he'd been counting since they left the parking lot, when he said without looking up, "Is the nice lady coming to the lake?" Logan kept his eyes on the road. "What lake?" "Our lake, the mud one." "Why would she come to our lake?" "I don't know," Miles said with the careful lightness of a 7-year-old who knew exactly what he was asking. "I just thought she might want to." Logan drove for a moment. The road went through a section of bare November trees, the light coming through horizontal, pale. "I could invite her," Logan said. "Okay," Miles said, and went back to counting nails. Logan thought about this for the better part of a week. Then he sent Celeste a message that said, "Miles and I are going to the lake Saturday. You're welcome to come if you want to get out of the city." He'd looked at that for a while before sending it, then sent it without revision, because the version that had revision in it was going to become something it wasn't supposed to be yet. She'd written back 40 minutes later. "What time?" She arrived at 9:15 in a car that was less conspicuous than he'd expected, and dressed in the manner of someone who had thought about what to wear for a cold lake morning and landed on practical rather than considered. Dark jacket, boots, a scarf that was doing actual work rather than decorative work. She had a thermos of coffee, and she offered it without ceremony, the way you offered coffee to someone you'd sat with through the long middle of a night. Miles had been on the dock since 8. He came up the slope when he saw the car, which was notable. Miles didn't usually interrupt dock time for arrivals. "You're the lake house person," he said. Celeste looked at him. "I am," she said. "Admiral is doing well," Miles said. "Probably. I can't verify it, but the population density in that area supports his survival odds." Celeste looked at Miles with an expression Logan hadn't seen on her before. Something open and undefended, like a window someone had finally gotten unstuck. "I'm glad to hear it," she said. "I'm Miles," he said, with the handshake that Logan had taught him when he was 4, and that still came out slightly more formal than a child handshake usually did. Celeste shook it. "I know," she said. "Your dad talks about you." Miles accepted this as appropriate and correct. "Come see the cattails," he said. "There are muskrat tracks." Celeste looked at Logan briefly, a look that was both a question and an answer simultaneously, and then she followed Miles down the slope toward the dock. Logan stood on the slope and watched his son lead this woman toward the mud and the cattails and the muskrat tracks, explaining something at volume and with the full commitment he brought to all educational situations. And he felt the weight of the moment in the specific way that quiet moments sometimes had weight, not dramatic, not announced, just dense with what was actually in them. He went down to the dock. The three of them spent the morning there. Miles found, cataloged, and named 4 separate things. A water strider he called Professor, a cluster of aquatic beetle larvae he classified by genus, with a reference book he'd brought in his backpack, a piece of driftwood he determined was from a cottonwood based on the bark texture, and a second muskrat track that he photographed for verification. Celeste asked questions that were not polite questions. They were genuine questions, the kind that required actual answers, and Miles responded to this with the escalating enthusiasm of a person who has found someone worth explaining things to. Logan sat on the dock and drank coffee from the thermos and watched and said almost nothing, because almost nothing was what was needed from him. At some point, Ghost waded into the shallows, a behavior he'd never shown interest in before, and stood there for a moment with the water around his legs looking at something beneath the surface. And Miles narrated this with scientific precision, and Celeste laughed at something Miles said, the real laugh, the one that surprised her, and Ghost came back out of the water and shook himself on all of them equally. It was not a perfect morning. Logan's coffee went cold before he finished it. Miles had a 20-minute period of genuine frustration when the beetle larvae he'd been observing relocated, and he couldn't find them. Celeste's boots were not quite as waterproof as advertised, and one foot got wet when she stepped too close to the shoreline. Ghost knocked the reference book into the dock gap, and it had to be retrieved with a stick. All of this happened, and none of it mattered, and all of it, somehow, was the point. In the afternoon, while Miles napped in the car in the way of kids who have spent themselves completely outdoors, Logan and Celeste sat on the dock in the particular quiet of late November, when the light came in low and the lake was the color of pewter and the cattails were brown and standing in the cold air without complaint. She told him about the restructuring, not the strategic version, the real version, how she'd sat in her office the week after the signing and looked at the organizational chart and understood that the things she'd built had been optimized for growth at the expense of something she didn't have a clean name for. Integrity was the word people used, and it was the right word, but it was also a word that had been used so many times it had worn smooth. What she meant was simpler. She had let the company become a place where the wrong people could thrive by hiding inside the right metrics. Victor was good at the metrics, she said. Every deliverable, every target, he gave me exactly what I asked for. And you didn't ask for the right things, Logan said. Not as an accusation. I didn't ask for honesty, she said. I asked for performance. Those aren't the same thing, and I knew they weren't the same thing, and I made the organizational choice anyway. She looked at the water. That's the part I have to carry. Logan was quiet for a moment. People build what they know how to build, he said. The version 2 is always different from the version 1 because you know more when you start it. She turned and looked at him. Is that what this is? Version 2? Of the company, yes, I think so. She held that. And personally, she said. It was a careful question, not reckless. She wasn't a reckless person, but direct in the way that questions from people who had stopped being afraid of answers were direct. Logan looked at the lake. He thought about what he'd told Miles. I think he knows where he is. I think that's enough. He thought about the version of himself that had walked into a parking garage to fix a generator relay and had come out the other side of something he hadn't seen coming, the way you never saw the things that mattered most coming. They arrived in the wrong place at the wrong time and turned out to be exactly right. I don't know yet, he said, honestly, but I think that's a good kind of not knowing. She looked at him for a long moment. The late light was on the water and on the bare trees across the lake and on her face, and she looked like someone standing at the edge of something she'd been walking toward for a long time without realizing she was walking. I've been alone for a long time, she said. Not... She stopped and started again. I've had people around me constantly. Staff, board members, investors. I've been in meetings every day for 10 years. I've been alone the whole time. Logan understood this. He understood it not from the outside, with sympathy, but from the inside. the specific loneliness of a person whose competence kept them at a useful distance from everyone, including the people they might have wanted closer. "I know what that's like," he said. "I know you do," she said. And she'd known it since 4 a.m. in a conference room, he thought. The way you sometimes knew things about people before you had evidence for them, before you could have explained how you knew. The lake moved. Somewhere behind them, Miles made a small sound in the car, not waking, just shifting. "I'm not going to tell you this is simple," Logan said. "I've got a 7-year-old who names rocks, and a 9-year-old dog with a distinguished service record, and a business that involves being in parking garages at midnight. That's what I have." "I know what you have," Celeste said. "And I know what you have," Logan said. "A $1 billion federal contract and 43 employees with executive-level network access and a restructuring in progress, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has been the most responsible person in every room they've ever been in." She almost smiled. "That's an accurate inventory." "Neither of ours is simple," Logan said. "No," she said. "But I stopped wanting simple a long time ago." She paused. "Simple just means nothing important is at stake." Logan looked at her. She was looking at the water, and the lines of her face in the late light were those of someone who had been through the fire of the last weeks, and had come out the other side not unscathed but clarified, the way materials sometimes were by heat, stripped of the excess, left with what was actually load-bearing. He reached over and took her hand. Not dramatically, just the way you did when you meant it and didn't need it to be more than what it was. She didn't pull back. She held it, and they sat on the dock in the November light with the lake going pewter and the cattails standing still and Ghost sleeping on the slope above them with his gray muzzle on his front paws. And the whole complicated ordinary weight of everything rested there between them without either of them needing to say anything more about it. There's something that nobody tells you about the moments that change your life. They don't announce themselves. They don't come with the orchestration of things you've rehearsed in your imagination. They come in parking garages at midnight and on docks in November and in the middle of a question from a 7-year-old about whether turtles remember. Logan had spent a significant portion of his adult life moving toward threats and away from attachments. And he had told himself for a long time that this was a personality trait rather than a fear, the way people reframed their fears when they didn't want to look at them directly. He was good at the work because the work had rules and edges and a defined perimeter, and when it was done, it was done. The rest of life, the staying, the building, the willingness to be known by someone across an ordinary breakfast table, was harder than anything he had done in a service corridor with a timer running. He understood, in the months that followed that November morning, that choosing the harder thing was not about courage in the operational sense. It wasn't the adrenaline clarity of a high-stakes moment, the decision that made itself because there was no time for hesitation. It was the slower, duller, more demanding courage of showing up repeatedly for something you couldn't control and couldn't protect yourself from and couldn't fix with training and a good dog. It was the courage of being present. Miles figured it out before Logan said anything official, which was Miles's way, arriving at conclusions through observation and cross-referencing his notebook with current events. One Sunday morning in December, he looked up from his cereal and said to Logan, "Celeste is coming for the holiday, right?" Logan looked at his son. "Who told you that?" "Nobody," Miles said. "I just know." "How do you know?" Miles shrugged with 7-year-old pragmatism. "Because you cleaned the house on Saturday. You don't clean the house on Saturday unless someone's coming." Logan looked around the kitchen, which was, in fact, cleaner than its baseline state. "She might be coming," he said. "Good," Miles said, and went back to his cereal. Then, "She can have the chair by the window. That's the best one. I want her to like it here." Logan stood in his kitchen and felt the thing that had no clean name, denser than happiness, less fragile than hope, more durable than either. The particular weight of something real. Ghost was on the floor near the heating vent, in the position he'd taken to in the cold months. Not quite fully asleep, one ear still moving. In early spring, he would have a veterinary assessment that would come back with the clean language of a dog in good health for his age, which meant some limitation in the hips and a suggestion to moderate high-impact movement. And Miles would sit with Ghost that afternoon and explain this to the dog in a thorough and compassionate briefing because Miles believed strongly in informed parties. Ghost would listen and then rest his chin on Miles's knee, which was, as far as anyone could interpret, his position on the matter. Celeste did come for the holiday. She brought Miles a field guide to freshwater organisms of the northeastern United States, which he received with the expression of someone who has been given something they wanted before they knew they wanted it. A specific astonishment, almost indignant in its intensity. She brought Logan nothing except herself and a bottle of wine and the information that she'd turned down 3 speaking invitations and a board request this week because she was trying something new, which was the decision to occasionally not be working. "How's that going?" Logan asked. "Terribly," she said. "I checked my email 6 times on the drive here." "That's progress," he said. "Last month it would have been 12. She laughed. The real one. The one that still surprised her sometimes. They ate dinner at the kitchen table, the 4 of them counting Ghost, who had positioned himself at the corner of the table with the patience of an animal who understood that meals eventually reached their conclusion and that proximity was a reasonable strategy. Miles talked about the field guide and about a theory he was developing regarding the relationship between water temperature and invertebrate diversity, and Celeste asked questions, and Logan ate and listened and felt the ordinary, irreplaceable weight of people he cared about at a table in a warm room. After dinner, Miles went to bed with the field guide and a flashlight, and Ghost settled in the hallway outside his door, which was Ghost's nighttime position, close enough to be present, far enough to maintain the personal dignity he felt strongly about. Logan washed dishes and Celeste dried them, which was the kind of domestic geometry that either felt natural or didn't, and felt, this evening, natural. Later, they sat on the porch, which was cold enough to require coats, but had the specific quality of a December night that rewarded the effort, clear, still, the stars visible in a way that the city never allowed. Celeste had her coffee and Logan had his, and between them was the comfortable quiet of people who no longer needed conversation to justify their company. "I used to think trust was a liability," she said. "I know. I built an entire business model around the idea that it was." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "It worked. The business succeeded, and it also produced Victor Sloan." "It produced other things too," Logan said. "Yes," she said. "It did." She looked at the sky. "I don't think trust is a liability anymore." "What is it?" She thought about it seriously, in the way she thought about things she meant to answer honestly. "The only thing that builds anything worth having," she said. Logan looked at the dark yard, at the edge of the light from the porch where the grass became shadow. He thought about the parking garage and the conference room and the service corridor and the dock in November. He thought about all the places trust had been the variable, the thing that failed and the thing that held and the thing that got rebuilt from whatever was left after the failure. He thought about Miles, asleep inside with a flashlight and a field guide, already composing questions for tomorrow. "Yeah," he said, "that's what it is." The night settled around them, cold and clear and undemanding, and somewhere inside the house Ghost moved in the hallway and then stilled again, and the porch light held its small circle against the dark, and in that circle 2 people sat with their coffee and the particular knowledge that they were exactly where they had, without planning it, arrived. Not at an ending. At the beginning of the ordinary thing, which was always, if you were paying attention, the more important of the 2.